Hello and welcome back to the Chase Joy podcast. I am your host, Flor, and I am excited to be back. I can't describe how happy I am to finally know that I have 2 episodes out. I feel like I can come on and just be myself and just share more. I just want to thank you guys for the DMs and the comments and the way that you all have been receiving the podcast. I'm so grateful for you guys. But I want to start with a little bit about my week and how it's been. It has officially been a week since launching my podcast. Episode 2 came out this morning, and that one is my testimony. So if you have not heard or watched that, please go back and listen. I really hope that it blesses you and that it helps you on your journey to get closer to God. But one of the things that I have been dealing with over the past week while I was editing the second episode was my problem with perfectionism. For so long, I mentioned in the other episode about how I deal with a lot of control issues, and perfectionism comes hand in hand with that. I knew I wanted to do the podcast, but I wanted it to be a certain way, sound a certain way, look a certain way. And I stopped myself from doing it and from putting it out there because I felt that the environment wasn't as zen as I wanted. I switched that so many times, and then I wanted the quality to look better, to sound better. So I was changing this and changing that. And then when it came to the editing part where I was listening to my voice and the things that I was saying, I realized that I use a lot of filler words. I use a lot of ums and likes and right and And so when I hear it and then I'm playing the rest of it, now all I do is hear it. And so it becomes really annoying. It's like when you buy a new car and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. That's how it feels when I was editing the podcast. I was like, I can't be hearing myself say like so often. It's funny now, but while I was editing, it was really frustrating. But I say all of that because I was reminded at how God uses imperfect people all of the time. And so if you're somebody that deals with perfectionism, I'm here to remind you that God can still use you, that you do not have to have things perfect. You just have to take the first step and get things moving. And the things that you want will come about as you learn and grow. I want to one day be a speaker, which is a crazy dream because that's not something little Flor would have wanted. But I do see myself doing speaking, and I need to learn how to speak better. That is just something that I need to learn to do. Going back to when I was editing the podcast, I was like, oh God, I stumble on my words so much. I'm using all of these filler words. I don't sound like so-and-so. And of course, all of these thoughts come in and I'm like, no, God, you called me to do this. You're going to give me the right words. You're going to help me figure it out. And I need to just put it out there. And so going back to how God uses imperfect people, I was reminded of the story of Moses. Moses felt he was not equipped to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He had a speech impediment. And God is like, I don't need you to say anything, just do what I say. And he eventually did what God called him to do. While I was editing the episode, I was like, God, I'm not good with my words. I continue to stumble and say the wrong thing, and I am just not equipped for this. God reminded me that I am already worthy and that I already have everything that I need to make this podcast and to put the word out there, and that ultimately I'm just being obedient and trying to do what I am being called to do despite feeling certain things. I am just wanting to put my faith in him and just doing it. I was reading in Romans 8 where it says, know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And it's funny because right now, right before I started recording, I was going through my notes and I looked at a devotional and the same verse came out and I was like, okay, God, I get it. Thank you for the confirmation. I'm just here to remind you that if there's something in your life that you feel you're being called to do and you're feeling like you're delaying it or procrastinating because you don't don't feel you're good enough or that you're ready or you're not equipped, be reminded that Jesus didn't call the equipped, he equipped the called. Okay. So if I can do it, you can do it too. But let's get into today's episode. This was probably one of the things that, as a new Christian, right, I want to remind everybody that even though I was saved about 10 years ago, I have only really started reading the Bible at the end of 2023. So I consider myself a new Christian. I feel like I'm a newbie. I feel like I'm a little baby, okay? I would say that I'm not well versed on everything, but I'm learning, and I just really want to share that with you because I feel there's so many of us that can relate to feeling like a beginner and then feeling, I don't know enough. But that's the whole point of enjoying the journey, is that you can just grow so much and learn so much if you just sit back and take it as it comes. And so one of the things that I really struggled with in the beginning, and I still pray about it, is hearing the voice of God. What does that sound like? And there's two things that I want to talk about when it comes to hearing the voice of God. It is relationship and communication. When you are getting to know somebody, you start learning about them. Let's think about, for example, a relationship. You find a cute boy and you start getting to know them. You start learning about them and how they speak and how they listen, or maybe they don't listen. You get to know all their little quirks and how their tone of voice changes with certain situations. You're basically learning about this person over time, and through spending time with them and getting to know them and having conversations with them, you develop this relationship. And all of a sudden, you guys have inside jokes and you have pet names that you call each other, and you understand their sense of humor. Maybe it's a very dry sense of humor. Maybe they're being very sarcastic. I don't know. But the point is that you start recognizing their voice. I don't know if you've ever gotten a call from a loved one, maybe a parent or a husband or a wife, and they call you from an unknown number and you hear them and you're like, oh, hey, like, where are you calling me from? Right? Because you recognize their voice. That didn't come from one day to another. It doesn't happen that way. It happens over time of getting to know that person and being in a relationship with them, learning how they communicate. I want to go into the second point, which is communication. We all communicate differently. When I got married and through our marriage, I have learned that my husband and I have very different communication styles. I am a very emotional person. I am going to want to talk about my feelings. If there is a disagreement between my husband and I am going to want to talk about it and just squash it and just be done with it, because I don't want to have any disagreements. And him, oh my goodness, it's very different. He is somebody that if we get into a disagreement, he needs his time and his space, because if I talk to him, it is not going to be a good conversation. It's not the right time. I have learned that over the years of getting to know him. And after I give him some time, I can go back and talk to him and we can have a conversation about what's bothering us. But that's something that I have had to learn about my husband, who I have now been with. Well, we've been married for 10 years. Then as a mom, oh my goodness, as a mom, like I mentioned in the other episode, you get humbled very quickly. You realize how your children are all going to be different. I have 3 kids. My oldest is a lot more sensitive. He definitely takes after his mom. I feel we are just very sensitive people. We wear our heart on our sleeve. And if I have to correct him for something, we cannot raise our voice. The tone of voice matters. He will cry. He's somebody that just likes to get talked to and he'll understand. And that's just how it has to be with him. My middle one, on the other hand, is the total opposite. He is my strong-willed child. My little Matthew is the reason why I have so many gray hairs. But he is somebody that is just very strong-willed. So if you communicate with him with, let's talk it out, he's going to be like, no, I'm just going to go take myself to timeout. Okay. He is just very different. But the other thing that I want to say is that as parents, you will also notice that The way you communicate with your children will also change and evolve over time as they grow and mature. Remember that, because I'm going to come back to that. But that is something that's very important. Now, the other thing is, let's talk about how we hear or how we listen. Hearing is just the taking in of the sound, and that's it. Listening is actually processing that information. When you're communicating with somebody, are you hearing them or are you listening to them? I felt very convicted with this because I do think that part of how I communicate tends to be where I talk over people. It's so embarrassing to say, but it's just the truth. I have the tendency of talking over people, and it's not with bad intention. It's just that my brain thinks so much faster than my words can come out of my mouth. Even right now, I have to literally hold myself back from saying things because I will stumble on my words and just say a lot of ums, okay? But I do realize that I can do that. I can talk over people. And I do feel part of why I do this is because I feel like I'm going to lose my train of thought or what I'm going to say. And so while somebody is speaking, instead of listening to them and processing what they have to say, sometimes I am just thinking about the next thing I'm going to say and not being quiet to be able to hear and listen to what their words are actually saying. Relationship and communication style has a lot to do with how you're going to hear the voice of God. Everybody's relationship is going to be different with God. What so-and-so does, what I do, what you hear a pastor talk about, what you hear a celebrity talk about in their relationship with God is going to be very different than your personal relationship with God. Do not let anybody make you feel less than or anything like that when it comes to your relationship with God, because it is just an individual thing. That's okay. Everybody's not supposed to understand you and your relationship. The other thing is that your communication, the way that you hear from God is going to be different. And like I mentioned earlier, as you grow in your faith and you mature in your faith, He will also be able to communicate differently to you. The style of communication may change, and that is okay. That is just part of your spiritual maturity. Now, I thought it would be interesting to be a little vulnerable with you guys about the things that I have prayed for in my journey through getting to know God and getting to know His voice. I have a prayer journal that I started at the end of last year, and just read a little bit of these two entries that I have where I'm literally just praying for God to help me know His voice. And so the first one that I have here is from December of 2023. And it says, "If I have been listening to my voice and not yours, then drown out my voice and anything else and let me hear you loud and clear. Help me to focus on solely you and not get distracted by anything else." That was in December. Now in January, about a month later exactly, I do need to give some context on this because it's pretty funny. This is a really good example of somebody that was on fire for Jesus, and then I stopped getting in the word and I got distracted with social media. I did other things that kept me distracted from what I was supposed to do, which was this podcast. I was working on the podcast. The holidays came around and I had some idle time. I got on TikTok and went down the rabbit hole on all these other things. And so on these entries, I am upset with God because not upset at Him. I was more upset at myself and just telling Him this, that I was so upset that I had lost my focus and I had stopped looking at Him and toward Him. This entry is pretty long, but I'm basically just saying I feel lost and confused. There's all this noise that is distracting me from the podcast, and I wanted to stay disciplined with getting to know Him. And it says, "Somewhere I got bored and I got distracted because of social media. The enemy loves this because he knows it messes with my head and confuses me. It makes me weak and it gives me self-doubt. So today it stops. For 1 week, I will not get on social media." And that's funny because the social media fast that I did was actually about 6 weeks. I think it was not 1 week. And that tells you a lot. But it says, I will pray and I will talk to you. I want to hear you. I want to feel the Holy Spirit. I want that peace back, and more than anything, your guidance. God, I'm so sorry that I strayed. I got too comfortable and let my flesh win. I let the things of this world consume me, and I give it up. I give it all up to have more of you. I need your guidance. I feel you calling me back to the podcast. I'll let you talk to me, God. I need you. I'm trying to be obedient, but I don't know your voice. Help me hear your voice. Let me hear you and differentiate between that and my voice. God. And then I just said, I'm so thankful that you never left me. I prayed and you answered. That gives you two examples of just a month apart of me literally trying to figure out how to hear the voice of God. So you are not alone in not understanding or not knowing. And so as a newbie Christian, I'm just being vulnerable and telling you that I have felt it as well, and I am learning. And so the things that I'm going to talk about as far as how some people hear the voice of God is just things that I looked it up. I listened to podcasts, the sermons. I went into the Word and just read on how people hear the voice of God. So if you're new in your walk with Christ, or if you're like me, somebody that maybe feels that they're Christian, but now really getting into the Word and really want to have a relationship with God, I want to give you some practical advice as to how I began this relationship and how I feel that God is currently speaking to me. And so the first thing is going to be the most obvious, which is that in order to have a relationship with God, you need to get to know him. And the best way to get to know him is to get in the Word. You have to open up your Bible and you have to start learning who God is, how he works. In the Bible, it says that the Word of God is living and active. So you can read the same book or the same verse multiple times and get something different out of it every single time. The Word of God will give you hope. If you're in despair, it will convict you, it will expose you, but ultimately it provides growth. It helps you grow in your relationship with God. And so reading the Bible is one way to get to know him and to start to learn how he wants to communicate with you. The second one is worshiping. So this can be at church or it can be by yourself. There's been multiple times that I have been worshiping and I just start bawling. I start crying because I feel the Holy Spirit come and just fill me with all of these emotions and gratitude and peace. And I feel holy. I feel whole. It's a feeling that I cannot explain. I wish that more people will feel it. But you can worship in whatever way that you feel is best for you. But through worship, it is also a good way to communicate with God and to get to experience him in a different way. The other way that God speaks to you is through other people. What do I mean by that? This can mean that somebody gives you a word, or let's say that you're listening to a podcast and all of a sudden they say something that you feel, oh my goodness, that speaks directly to me. Those are not coincidences. It is not luck. It is God that is putting those things in front of you so that you can hear it and so that you can see, oh, that is for me. That's God telling me something. Sometimes we ask for signs, and honestly, God doesn't need to give you signs. He doesn't, but he will speak to you through signs or through people. And so through others can also be through church, listening to a sermon, through a Christian friend, through your small group or Bible study. There are so many things that others can say that speaks directly to you and to your heart. I want to give you an example. I have been praying about confirmation that I'm doing the right thing with this podcast and just making sure that it's not for me, that I'm serving others, and that ultimately it's going to be for God and to glorify him. And this morning I was going to post a reel and I felt I needed to share it on my Facebook. And I don't know if you're like me, but my Facebook is very different than my Instagram. My Facebook is mostly people that I know personally. There can be coworkers, friends, and a lot of family that is on there. But I don't normally share my social media stuff on there. It's part of me feeling a little bit like I don't want them to know everything that I'm doing. But this morning when I was going to put that reel, it was a clip from my testimony. I felt God was telling me, you need to share it on your Facebook. And part of me was like, I don't want to. But okay, so I did the little thing, connected the two apps, and I shared it. Within 5 minutes, I get this awesome message from this coworker that I had in a previous job. And she basically gave me confirmation that it was that message that she needed to hear from me sharing that. As a believer, you will start to experience things like that, where certain things that they say can be confirmation for something that you've been praying about. That is another way that God speaks to you. Now, as individuals and as we grow in our relationship with God, He's going to learn how He can communicate with you where you will listen to Him. Going back to our communication styles, for example, with my husband and how he needs his time, and on the other end, I'm a talker and I am more sensitive and I need to be talked to in a different way. All of those things, God takes into account how you are. He knows you. He knows everything about you. He knows if He has to be a certain way with you to say something, or if you are going to ignore it, if He tells you in this way and you're like, whatever, that's not it. He knows that about you. He's going to communicate in a way that's very individualized and very you. I know that there are some people that will audibly hear the voice of God. I have never audibly heard the voice of God. Do I want to hear the voice of God? Yes. And I'm also terrified, but I would love to be able to hear the voice of God audibly. Some people have visions or dreams. I want to be a dreamer vision person. I will say that one day, not too long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a dream of a bee. And I normally do not remember my dreams at all. I dream quite a bit, I think, because I get really good sleep, but I don't usually remember the dreams. But this particular time, I remember in the dream, I was being shown a bee, and it wasn't just a little bzz. No, it was right in front of me. It was showing me the visual of a bee up close and personal, something to where I couldn't miss. I couldn't not remember this. I want to share what I read about the dream. When I looked it up the following day, it says bees and dreams are generally linked to hard work or efficiency. Perhaps you're busy with a new project at work or have a personal project. Mind you, I was working on getting everything ready for the podcast. And then it says that it also means that you will be rewarded for your hard work. When I saw that in the morning, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. God is so good. It was just a confirmation for me of what I had been praying. Now, I want to tell you guys how I have personally been feeling that God is speaking to me in this season. For me, I feel it is just a knowing. And what I mean by that is that I get a hunch or a gut feeling about things. The knowing in my heart that is so deep that nobody would understand, and there's not really a way to explain it. I just know. There's no other way than to just explain it in that manner. But this podcast is an example of that. I knew over 2 years ago that I was supposed to start a podcast. I already knew. I know that there are big things in store for me that God is preparing me for. I don't know what anything else looks like in between, but I know those things. I will also get a knowing when I'm asking for confirmation. It's like the example of the dream. God knew that I would look it up the following day and know that it was a confirmation to the prayer that I had been praying. But yeah, I do feel maybe knowers, people like me, are perhaps a little bit more in tune with their emotions. We're more like empaths. I think that has served me well in my career because I do listen to a lot of people telling me about their feelings and how things are going. And I feel like that's been my superpower when it comes to being a PA. It's just that I tend to do well with people telling me about their feelings and emotions and then helping them through that. So yeah, God can talk to you in so many ways. And this is, for me, the way that I just have been feeling that He has been speaking to me. I get this feeling of I shouldn't do it this way, or I should do this instead. I have been feeling more of a discernment with things, with situations, with the use of my words, with who I talk to, who I don't talk to, situations that I'm put in. I have been feeling that knowing. And there's no way that I can explain it other than I know that if you are a knower, you'll understand. Now, if you heard my prayer earlier that I read from the journal, is that I do ask God to help me differentiate my voice and his voice. And I feel that's super important to pray because, girl, I also have big dreams. If I were to just be super selfish and write down a list of the things that I want for my life, there can be a million things. And what I'm trying to do is differentiate that voice from God, because ultimately I'm at a place in my life where if it's not God's call for my life, I don't want it. If God is not leading me to it, I don't want it. I want it only if God is telling me that that is something that is for me. So I always want to know, is this his voice or is this mine? And so the best way to learn if it's his voice or yours is to take it back to the Bible and to see if it is biblical, the things that you are thinking of, the things that you are hearing, feeling, dreaming of, if they are biblical, if they give you peace, then usually those can be something that God is calling you to do. And again, the thing that I'm currently doing that may be helpful for you is to just ask for confirmation. Never just take one thing and then just jump at it, especially if it's a big decision that you're trying to just see what the best decision is. Pray about it, ask for confirmation, and be patient. And let me tell you about patience, because patience also comes with stillness and having just time to rest on it and to just be in the waiting. That's been something that's been really hard in my life because I'm somebody that's always been rushing. I was so used to rushing and doing the next thing and achieving the next thing and what's the next goal without ever just sitting on it, thinking about it, praying about it, reading the word. It was really hard for me to just sit still and wait on God to give me the answer to the prayer. Sometimes you're going to be in a waiting season. There are prayers that may not be answered. There are prayers that will be answered right away. But at the end of the day, you need to be patient and just wait on God and have the faith that God is going to come through and give you the answers to your prayers. The last thing we want is to pervert the word to fulfill our own desires. We do not want to manipulate the word to fit our agenda. And in everything, just ask for confirmation and wait. Be still. The other thing that I want to mention is when God gives you a word, when God gives you a sign, when God answers a prayer, are you being obedient and doing something about it? If you are somebody that hears or feels something and then you're like, nah, that wasn't you, and then you go on your way and you do something that is not godly, that is not biblical, then God is also going to wait to speak to you because you are not stewarding well the things that he's telling you to do. And so sometimes the waiting period will be longer because he needs to refine things about your character. He needs to help you grow in certain things so that when it's right in front of you, you can actually be in the posture to receive it and to see it and to hear it. There was weeks where I wasn't feeling like I was hearing God or feeling God or knowing that he was moving in my life, but I still stayed faithful. I still got in the word. I still worshiped him. I still felt peace. That's one thing, is that I never have lost the peace while I've been in the word. I know that he was always there, but to get an answer to a prayer or to hear confirmation, it wasn't so clear to me. And I just want to encourage everybody, because I'm literally telling you guys this as somebody that is learning. I feel like I'm a new Christian. I am learning, and I just want to share what I'm learning with you guys, because there are so many people out there that want to believe or want to get closer to God, but they don't know how. The best thing that you can do is to buy yourself a Bible and just start reading. A common question that a lot of new believers have is, what Bible do I get and where do I start? And for me, I'll tell you that since the fall to now, I think I've purchased 4 Bibles. The first one is a woman's study Bible. It's the NIV translation. That's a really good translation if you're looking for something that's easy to read. The second and third one are Message translations. And then the fourth one that I just got, which I am really liking as somebody that really craves knowledge and background and history and just a really good explanation, is the Life Application Bible. I'll link them below on the description. I really like it because it gives a lot of context. And so it is much slower to read if you actually go through all those things. But again, you're supposed to be studying the Bible. It's not a regular book. It's not like you just go from the beginning to end. This is something that I actually didn't know when I picked up the Bible for the first time, is that the Bible is several books in one. Okay. I didn't know that, but that is how it is. If you're new, I recommend you start in the New Testament in the Gospels. The Gospels basically talk about the story of Jesus, and they are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I personally started with Matthew, and then a friend recommended I start with Luke. And I do believe that Luke was a little bit more of my style of writing. So whichever one you want to start with, that's just a really good place to start. The new Life Application Bible that I have is an NLT translation, a really good mix between NIV and the Message. I feel it translates well into our contemporary English language. If you're somebody like me that likes to deep dive into things, the Life Application Bible is really good. That is really all that I have for today's episode. I hope that it helps you, because hearing the voice of God and learning to hear the voice of God is something that you are going to learn and grow in every day as you spiritually mature. I cannot wait for what else God has in store for me in his communication and his relationship with me. It is something that you have to dedicate time. Going back to the example of being in a relationship with somebody, you can't just meet somebody, go on a date for the first time and be like, you're marrying me. You can't, right? You have to get to know the person. There's so much that will happen and things that you'll learn from them through different situations. If you put yourself in a stressful situation, how is that person going to react? Only time will tell. And so the same thing is with God. You need to just put in the work of dedicating some time every day to spend time with him. Just last week, I will tell you that I was telling a friend how I was feeling the disconnect with God because I was so focused on getting things ready for the podcast. I was feeling really tired all of last week, exhausted, tired. I don't know if it was stress or I wasn't sleeping well. I don't know, but I couldn't even get up in the morning to work out the way I normally do. Usually I wake up at 4, and after my 45-minute workout, I would read the Bible. Well, that wasn't working out, because if I couldn't wake up to exercise, then I was skipping Bible time, and I wasn't doing it on purpose. It was just my body was just very physically tired. And so I was like, okay, God, I realize you're telling me right now. I felt the conviction that, hey, don't forget to come back to me. Don't forget to have quiet time in your secret place with me. And so I thought about it, and I was like, how do I spend more time with you? How do I fix my schedule to where I can have this time that I'm dedicating solely to you? And so what I did, and I tested it out, is that I woke up and I read the Bible first, and then I would work out. And it worked out so well. I did it again this morning. Yeah, I really like this, because now if I wake up late and let's say that I don't have time to work out, that's okay. But at least I got to connect and have that quiet time with God. And so things are going to change. Things are going to evolve. And I share that because I feel that even more so now, having this podcast, I need to make sure that I continue and remain connected to God, and not for the podcast, but just for me and my relationship with him, because I do crave knowing more about him, getting to know him. The peace that I feel and the joy that I feel, I want to continue to feel. I want to continue to share what I know. But ultimately, I just want to do God's will for my life. Everybody's going to have their own journey, their own style, their own time, their own way of spending time with the Lord. And I just encourage you to find what works best for you. Do not think that you have to do what I am doing. Don't think that you have to wake up at the butt crack of dawn to spend time with God. You do not. You can do this if you are a busy mom and you only get time at night when your kids go to bed. hey, if that's you and that works for you, go for it. If you are a busy person, but you know that you always have an hour break for lunch, then do your time with God during that lunch break. Whatever it is that you have to do, just put in the effort. God sees what you're doing if it's coming with good intention. Don't do it if you think, well, so and so says that I have to do this so that I can go to heaven. That's not how it works. God wants it to be pure, but you have to start somewhere. So I encourage you to just start today. If you don't know where to start, if you have questions, please send me a DM. I really want to hear back from you guys. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. If you are hearing this through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any other area that you listen to podcasts, you can look at the description and follow me on social so that you can send me a DM, leave me a review. I would love to hear from you. And if there's any topics that you want me to cover as somebody that is new to your faith, if you are wanting me to cover anything just about life, I have so many experiences that I would love to share with you guys. But yeah, tell me, give me feedback. I would love to hear from you. I hope that this message blessed you, and I cannot wait to come back next week. I hope you guys have a great one. Bye.